I went through 6 years of speech therapy. I could not speak a single sentence without stuttering profusely. And nothing in speech therapy could help me. I couldn't look at people in the eyes, so all my life, I stared at the ground. Anybody came up to me, I'd stare at the ground. I found fossils and mushrooms.
We are all of the stars. My kingdom was born from the heavens 4.5 billion years ago. We are the pioneers. We climbed out of the sea to create the fertile soil and set the stage for all of life.
In South Africa, in the sediments of lava, they have found fungus-like organisms, Mycelium fossils in the lava.
2.4 billion years old.
This is the oldest record of a multicellular organism on Earth. This year, another fossil was found in the sediments of Brazil.
It's 113 million years old.
And it's a perfectly shaped mushroom.
We divided from fungi about 650 million years ago. One branch led to fungi, the other branch led to animals.
We chose the path of encirculating our nutrients in a cellular sac, a stomach. The mycelium remained underground, externally digesting its nutrients.
Biodiversity surged. Until we had these great cataclysmic extinction events. And when the asteroids impacted the Earth, bam! Enormous amounts of debris was jettisoned in the atmosphere. Sunlight was cut off. Plants die, animals die. And fungi inherited the Earth. From these extinction events, there's one lesson. Those organisms that paired with fungi survived.
We are more closely related to fungi than we are to any other kingdom. What this means is that we are descendants of Mycelium. Mycelium is the mother of us all.
Living creatures like fungi are intelligent in the sense that they respond to their environment, they seek out food, and they defend themselves. They solve problems, and that's intelligence.
A mycelium can theoretically live forever, as long as it has food to grow into, which is why the oldest and largest organism on Earth is a fungus. It lives on top of a mountain in Oregon. It's like thousands of acres and it's thousands of years old. The mushroom is the organ of sexual reproduction for the spore of the fungus. Fungi don't have seeds, they have spores. The spores are extremely tiny, little lightweight gene-carrying systems. When they land on something they can eat, they break down the food that they're on and then reabsorb the nutrients because you need to move on and find another place where there's food. The mushroom releases zillions of spores into the atmosphere. There's so many spore, I mean, you take one breath, you just breathed in 10 fungal spore. So they are everywhere. We've evolved with them.
When you see what mushrooms do, it's kind of spooky in the most wonderful way. I mean, they correct everything on Earth. They support life, they convert life, they carry life. They're remarkable beings. If humans become extinct, what's the next species that will take over the Earth? Maybe Mycelium already are the dominant species, not just because they're the most common species on Earth, they're everywhere. I mean, you look at humans, there's 7 billion of us, but we're just one little creature wandering around incredibly vulnerable and don't survive easily if we're assaulted.
Hurricane Harvey has started to make landfall here on the Texas coast. More than 30,000 people are without power, and things are only expected to get worse.
Puerto Rico has had the worst storm in about a century, and it is struggling to understand the new normal of months ahead without basic services.
Climate change is one of the biggest threats to our present world, to the future of our planet.
CO2 is our biggest greenhouse gas. As plants photosynthesize, they literally inhale CO2 while exhaling oxygen. CO2 is what plants photosynthesize, and they take that carbon and they put it in different places. They put it in their leaves, in their trunks, but they put 70% of it we're finding below ground. And the root systems trade that carbon for nutrients. The carbon ends up in the fungal cell walls where it's stored. This fuels the microbial community and all the other parts of the food web, like the mites and nematodes, and they start cycling nutrients through that eating process. So the fungi are really important in stabilizing carbon in soils. Once the carbon is stable, it can stay there stored for thousands of years. We know, for example, that carbon can move from plant to plant, and it evens out the distribution of carbon in that system. They're working really hard. If we maintain the plants, the forest, and the natural fungal community, we've got a natural engine that's just storing carbon below ground. So it's essential. You know, it's there for us, right? It's right in front of us.
We do more than make mushrooms. We have the ability to do so much more than just break down matter. Like the fruit of our labor, most of you have only scratched the surface of our usefulness. We are the changers.
I was 14 or 15 years of age, I believe, when my brother John gave me a book called Altered States of Consciousness. And within that book, Andy Weil was referenced on expanding consciousness, and I got really excited. I was going to charismatic Christian revival meetings and seeing people being saved, but it kind of was cool from my perspective that they were achieving this altered state of consciousness. So I thought that was part of all the same idea here. I really owe credit to Andrew Weil.
I think he read one of my early books in which I wrote about mushroom hunting and psychedelic mushrooms and made some reference to medicinal mushrooms as well.
It was like a turning point. You know, like I certainly was awakened that other people were thinking about expanding consciousness. And so I gave this book to my friend Ryan Snyder. So Ryan took it home, and a few days later I said, "Ryan, where's my book?" And he told me his dad had burned it. I said, "Burned my book?" That rather than giving it back to me or calling my parents, he actually took the initiative to burn this book. I owe Ryan Snyder's father a deep debt of gratitude because that single act galvanized my interest, saying if this is so powerful to cause a person to do such a bizarre act, then I should examine what this subject's all about.
Human existence on this earth goes back an extraordinarily long period of time, most of which we have no identifiable information. It's entirely plausible, given that the indigenous people all around the world know intimately all the plant life and will know the different combinations of plant life. that our prehistoric ancestors, they had come across the plants that do alter consciousness.
In about 2 million years, the human cortex tripled in size and the brain exploded over a ridiculously short span of evolutionary time. 2 million years is nothing when it comes to evolution. What triggered that?
In the late 1970s, Terence McKenna and his brother Dennis McKenna were the first that proposed the stoned ape hypothesis. It is known now that 22 primates, 23 including us, consume mushrooms. And the idea was our ancestors, they came out of the trees and went across the savannah, would be tracking animals that were pooping. Well, in the subtropics, the most common mushroom coming out of those cow patties is Psilocybe cubensis, a potent magic mushroom.
One thing that mushrooms and other psychedelics do reliably is they induce synesthesia. Synesthesia is the perception of one sensory modality in another. Hearing colors, for example, or seeing music. You have these profound experiences, and you have to put yourself in their place and imagine what the impact of such an experience must have been on an early hominid.
These magic mushrooms open up the floodgates of information you receive. Basically, you can think of it as a contact fluid between the synapses within the brain. Wow, what a competitive advantage, especially if you're working with the geometry of weapons or having to put together something that will give you a better chance of survival. The fact that this happened not once, not twice, but millions upon millions of times over millions of years is a very plausible explanation for the tripling of the brain 2 million years ago.
It's not so simple to say that they ate psilocybin mushrooms and suddenly the brain mutated. I think it's more complex than that, but I think it was a factor. It was like a software to program this neurologically modern hardware to think, to have cognition, to have language. Because language is essentially synesthesia. Language is an association with inherently meaningless sound, except that it's associated with the complex of meaning. A great deal of the brain's real estate, you might say, is devoted to the generation and or the comprehension of language. Those neural structures are not found in our ancestors. That's a human trait, to have so much physiology devoted to generating and understanding language. And that's a reflection of evolutionary events that made us what we are.
I couldn't get these mushrooms for the longest time. When I was in Ohio, I actually purchased a bag of magic mushrooms. But I had no guide. I had no recommendations for how much to consume. So I had a bag about this big, so I thought, well, that's probably one dose. So I consumed the bag. Now, for those of you who don't know, this is like 10 times more than you probably need to consume. It was a warm summer day, and there was a beautiful, big tree, an oak tree. And then I noticed the black clouds on the horizon, and I realized there was a storm coming. And I thought, this is great. I have this great visual of the storm coming. And I thought, well, I'm going to climb to the top of the tree. So I'm starting to feel the effects. I'm getting waves where the air becomes a liquid. And you have this distortion field go through the visual landscape. I've never seen that before. I'm going, oh, wow, this is what they were talking about. And I see the boiling clouds are coming closer, but they're looking angry now. And then the lightning strikes would go, and then all these geometrical fractals would emanate out of the lightning strikes. And pretty soon I had these overlying mosaics of mathematical patterns and geometric figures of multiple colors that were swimming in this field of vision that these waves were flying through. I've never in my life seen anything like that before. Winds increasing, then the rains would come, and I became extremely scared. And then also I realized I'm on the top of a hill doing a lightning storm in the tallest tree. not the best place to be when you're going to choose a spiritual experience. And so I held on to the tree for dear life. And that tree was my